This is episode 325 of the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, and joining me, my good buddy and Montana Seahawker, Adam Emmert.
Hello, Brandon. Now, before we get started here, I just wanted to bring something to your attention so it doesn't scare you or scare the listeners, because the cabin is placed directly underneath a gigantic fir tree, and it's been snowing buckets for like 2 weeks. And then today it decided to warm up quite a bit and the wind to blow 100 miles an hour. So every so often you may hear a loud bang as if a dead body just fell on top of the roof. Don't worry, there's nobody dead. It's just a giant piece of snow hitting the metal roof.
Giant buckets of snow. How has that tree not turned itself into firewood already?
It's warming up to it. I'll tell you that much. I liked it for the shade initially, but now this seems a little detrimental.
It seems a little bit concerning to have huge buckets of snow dropping on your roof.
Yeah. I mean, stormy weather here in Montana, things uncertain. It's a lot like the Seahawks offseason with Russell Wilson. Who knows what's going on with him, right? I mean, we're still all talking about that story about how he's getting traded. Oh.
It's kind of quieted down a little bit.
That went away, huh? Interesting.
It's not like he came out and demanded a trade or anything in the last week.
What?
I know. In fact, it was a Josina Anderson tweet that had everybody buzzing. Source reaffirms this morning, Russell Wilson isn't getting traded. Hashtag current status.
Hashtag future status as well, right?
I thought it was interesting, though, because Joe Fann, I feel like we're with the Seattle local media. See, with the national media, it blows up like it's the worst thing ever. Russell Wilson's getting traded. And so that's what we were reacting to last week. Mm-hmm. Well, this week, I felt like at least with some of the Seattle-based media, they were trying to corral it into a bucket that was closer to what the actual issue is.
Oh.
And I thought Joe was, he was trying to do this with his tweet. He said, how you should read this. Russell Wilson isn't getting traded right now. How you shouldn't read this. Things are A-OK between Wilson and the Seahawks. So it's somewhere between the worst thing ever, but it's not everything just being great and rainbows and everything with Wilson and the Seahawks.
Yeah, and that's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, as I sat and listened more and more to what Russ had actually said, it sounded a lot like, to me anyways, that he's sick and tired of the offensive line being a piecemeal thing. He wants them to spend more resources and money on the offensive line and shore that up so he's not running for his life because he can't run like he used to. And that they've had this conversation the last probably 2-3 years behind closed doors. And finally, he's like, all right, like maybe if I put him on blast, like in a Russell Wilson fashion of blast, right? On a scale of 1 to 12, he cranked it up to like 4,
And people are like, oh my gosh, Russell Wilson never talks like this.
Right.
In fact, him saying that he's tired of getting hit, they had to really work to make that into Russell Wilson throwing the offensive line under the bus.
Right. And so he just put a tiny bit of public pressure on the Seahawks to do a little bit more with the offensive line. And then my guess is that worked out because we haven't heard squat since then, because I'm sure after those interviews that day, John and Pete are calling Russ and be like, dude, why are you putting us on Russell Wilson level blast? I mean, that was all the way up to level 4. Like, come on, man.
You never go past 3. 3 is your number.
Let's talk about this 3. And so that's probably what they've been doing. And I'm sure it's all going to buff out for this year and most likely for next year as well. Now, from there, he'll be a 34, 35-year-old quarterback. And, sure, I think at that point, it's time to start talking a little differently about his future in Seattle. But at this point, come on, man.
Hey, it is the offseason. People have to, you have to find something to talk about. And you know what? Your characterization of that, it matches up with kind of what we heard from Dan Patrick then, saying that, because he went on the radio saying, a source told me the Seahawks management is not happy with Russell Wilson and his camp for talking about this to the media. And that makes sense too, because if Russell Wilson is going out and saying, our organization really needs to focus on getting me offensive linemen this offseason. This is like a supply and demand thing. Like if you're a general manager, if a general manager, you're calling and talking to teams or talking to players, and they know that this is something you want to do and this is a goal of your offseason, the price might go up a little bit. And John Schneider does not want the price to go up. He wants the prices to be relatively, he just doesn't want his hand being tipped.
Do you really think that Russ saying that he wants a little more help on the offensive line changes the price of offensive linemen? Do you think when John Schneider is calling, say, I don't know, whoever the GM of the Carolina Panthers is these days and looking into one of their prospects and is asking about, do you think when John asks about that prospect, the GM doesn't think, oh, he might want this guy. I'll ask for as much as I can get.
I mean, that's going to happen anyway. It's not so much of the actuality. It's the perception.
Well, and there's certainly a perception around it. And, you know, the Seahawks will do what they need to do this year on offensive line. You know that they're going to go out and they're going to address it a little more seriously. And I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think Russ is wrong on this situation. And I mean, somebody in the Ring of Honor pointed out the idea that once the cover 2 kind of got implemented against our offense the second half of the season and it really struggled and the offensive line got hurt and they really struggled as a unit, the scribble plays that Russ had usually relied on and that we had usually relied on to make the offense still go just weren't there. He's definitely still very mobile, but he's not the Houdini that he was in his first few years as a quarterback. And that makes total sense, man. He's getting a hair older.
Right.
That's all right.
I know that's one of the things that about this season that really stuck out to me is people, you know, whenever Russ would take off with the ball and he'd pick up, you know, an 18, 20 yard gain, they're like, oh man, you know, 2012 Russ, he would have taken that to the house. Yeah. That was 9 years ago, people. Like,
yeah,
think about yourself. And when you age 9 years and the things that you could do 9 years ago and the things that you can't do now, that's Russell Wilson now.
Yeah, that was 9 years and about 400 sacks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that it's interesting, though, that now we're starting to get a little bit of the backlash against Russell Wilson. And I'm curious about how much he hears that, because there's all that talk. And even the Dan Patrick interview kind of pushed on it a little bit, saying that, well, you kind of hold the ball a little bit too long. And he's like, yeah, but I make some good plays holding the ball too long sometimes. But you start to hear people saying, you know, get rid of the ball a little bit quicker, or find other ways so that you aren't a part of the problem. I just wonder if he's going to hear some of that and take some of that to heart here in this offseason too.
Oh, I'm sure he's been hearing that his entire career, right? You hold the ball too damn long. What are all these pirouettes backwards? Like, you know, this isn't how quarterbacks played, yada, yada, yada. He hasn't really changed his style a lot. The thing is that when he's had good protection and the scheme's been good and the receivers are getting open, he doesn't hold the ball forever. I mean, he does that a lot out of necessity, or he has over the last few years. And look, there's not one quarterback that's ever played the position that hasn't held the ball too long and gotten sacked. It's part of playing the game.
Sure.
I mean, some guys are better at it than others, right? Brady, Manning, those are guys that come to mind that, you know, they hit the back foot and the ball's out no matter what. And that's great. That's their style of play. There's been other quarterbacks that hold the ball for even longer than Russ and make it even a bigger problem. They don't have that internal clock. So it's just one of those things that you have to accept with Russ's game. Are a third of the sacks that have occurred against Russell Wilson maybe his fault? Probably. Is that the end of the world? No.
Yeah, I think it was 31% was this past year, which was the biggest percentage. And that's, you know, that's if you go into Pro Football Focus and which ones they attribute to Russell Wilson and which ones they attribute to the offensive line. 31% is pretty high, but still, that's a lot of sacks by the offensive line. So I know there's people probably out there saying, yeah, you've been telling us that Russell Wilson was holding the ball too long all season because we commented on that. And now you're saying that the offensive line needs to improve. Which one is it? It's both.
Yes. Yes, absolutely both. And the idea of him holding the ball too long the second half of the season, I really do think that came down to scheme. I genuinely do. And the way that he was reading the field. I mean, it felt like he was going deep to short on every progression, every time he dropped back to pass. It just didn't make any sense to me when the check down was there. And I mean, with Shaheen here now, like we might have a different Russell Wilson in that sense. He might have him read out these plays a little differently.
Well, it seems to me that there was obviously a Brian Schottenheimer issue because he's the one that ended up getting fired this offseason. But there was one thing that Brandon Marshall said that made me think that maybe the Brian Schottenheimer problem was bigger than any of us really knew, because when Brandon Marshall was talking about his interaction with Russell Wilson and Schottenheimer, and they were talking about what they were going to do with the offense, it was Brian Schottenheimer saying, well, this is what Pete wants. Not, this is what we're doing as the team. You hear Brian Schottenheimer saying, and this is obviously hearsay through Brandon Marshall, but if that's what it was, if it wasn't Brian Schottenheimer saying, this is what we're doing as a team, instead of saying, well, this is what Pete wants, that's not leadership at your offensive coordinator position.
No, that's being a bit undermining.
Right.
And then also, too, Brandon talking about those interactions, right? Why the game plan this week, this is what Pete wants to do. Shouldn't that be the conversation that occurs every single week on every single team in the NFL? Hey, this is what coach wants to do this week.
Yeah.
Isn't that how that goes? I mean, maybe those conversations had a different context and a different tenor in the terms of, well, you know, the Russ and Shotty and whoever else is standing around talking like, ooh, I bet you we can really attack this team here. And if we do that, that'd be a real cool thing. And then Shotty being like, well, we could do all that, but this is what coach wants to do this week.
And we talked about how literal Schottenheimer can be in taking orders from a head coach, going back to the story of Rex Ryan saying that we want to run the ball and Schottenheimer running it 40-some times in a game.
Yeah. He does seem to have an issue, like being able to add his own flow to the general order, right? Whatever that request is from the higher ups, he takes it by the letter in it all the way, which is great. I mean, cool. There's a time and place for that. I mean, like the military, I guess. I don't know. But in every other aspect in life, it's more of a directive that you can color outside the lines a little bit from there. You know, add
and
your own
Pete
flavor.
saying, and having Pete saying, I want to run the football, but I still want to hit those big plays. I could see that having manifested itself through Russell Wilson's play in the second half because of the fact that he was looking for the big plays. He continued to look for the big plays. And so reading that deep to short coverage, that could absolutely be what it is. Like, okay, this is what coach wants to do. He wants to hit the big plays. He wants to run the ball, and absolutely ignoring the short stuff. And so Russ wasn't even reading that stuff.
And then on top of that, you didn't run the ball that well.
Right.
And that's the biggest issue of all this, is that you didn't dominate in the trenches, so you couldn't run the ball very well. So it didn't set up those deep plays. And the whole thing comes unraveled at that point. So in full circle here, this gets back to Russ's point. He's like, yeah, we need to spend more on the offensive line. Now, I think he's thinking, I'd love to have some guys that are really badass at pass protection, where, in my opinion, I'm sitting there thinking about going, I want some guys who are road graders and just, dominates the trenches. That's what I'd like to see.
Or if they could do both would be good too.
Well, that's a neat idea. Turns out big, athletic, smart, talented guys that can do both those things at the same time don't grow on trees. They're hard to find.
No, and when you do have a chance to get them, they're going to cost a little bit of extra money. But if they would have spent, instead of spending $6 million on, or $4.5 million on Brandon Shell, whatever it was, they go out and spend $10 million on one of the more top tier right tackles. Or this year, if they go out and get a top flight left guard rather than a middling one, what you're getting then at least. And I mean, are they going to be able to afford that? Maybe they're going to have to make some cuts in some other spots. We'll see. But if there's one thing that convinced me last year, is that if they would have not gotten Greg Olsen and spent more money at the right tackle and had a guy who could play there all season and be really good, then I would have taken that.
I'm stunned that we're sitting here and you're talking about Brandon Shell, the problem.
I'm not saying he's the problem. I'm saying he was good when he was out there. He was okay. I'm not saying he was great. But if you
he was a B-. He's pretty good.
I'm saying there were other guys out there. And
he still wasn't Jermaine Ifedi.
No.
Like that was a massive upgrade in one season at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, when he was on the field.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was more times than not. And injuries are injuries, man. Like, you can't predict that.
I'm just using him as an example. And
right,
now if
that's
you can
the
shift
wrong
that,
dude.
If you can
that's
shift
the wrong dude.
Okay.
You should be, if you're pointing fingers at money not well spent, Upati's the guy that you look at. Upati, and then the idea that you rolled with Posick at center this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the interior that needs to be addressed. I'm fine with Shell.
Long-term option, maybe not, but we'll see.
For next year, sure.
Oh yeah, for next year, okay. And Abuehi was a fill-in replacement that was about Jermaine Ifedi-esque, so it worked out that way.
Yeah,
but yes, okay. So if they spend that money that they spent on Mike Upati and Greg Olsen, combine that into one, and you're getting a $10 million guard. You're getting a pretty good guard.
Right. There you go. Now you're picking on the right guys.
Or a center. For $10 million, you get Pro Bowl level center.
Mm-hmm. And what do you get when you get a Pro Bowl level center beyond the blocking abilities?
Diagnosing defensive fronts and...
That's exactly right. Calling protections, diagnosing the front, finding the mic, all that stuff. That would be great. I'd love to have another guy up there with Russ scanning that defensive front and being able to be sure that you get into the right protections every time, because a lot of these sacks, it wasn't so much that the offensive line was not talented or couldn't hold their own if they were asked to block a guy. It's that they're in the wrong damn protection, or they ran a stunt up front and totally confused them. You get a real leader on the offensive line at the pivot, that helps with a lot of those problems.
I was going back and looking at some of the past Super Bowls to see who the centers were for the quarterbacks and playing in the Super Bowl. And I was surprised to find out that a lot of the centers were top paid Pro Bowl caliber center. I was expecting to see that, okay, that's a position that most teams can get by on and make it to the Super Bowl and not have it be that big of a deal. I think the Rams were one where the center that they had that year wasn't making a ton of money. I could be wrong. But the point was the majority of the teams actually had star centers.
Yeah, I mean, just look at Tampa this year with Wildman Jensen.
Yeah.
Like that dude with the long flowing hair, and he's just mean at the end of every play. I like that. He's going to get you one penalty every game playing that way, and one bad snap, but it was fun. I mean, he's a mauler, went out there and just dominated guys.
So yes, I would be okay if they went out and paid money to bring in a big center.
Yeah, center or guard, man. And it's funny, too, because with Russ talking about the offensive line problems, being like, oh, geez, I wish we had better ones. How many years did we sit and joke about how the Seahawks have brought in every guard imaginable in the league, collecting all the guards, and yet here we are. We got the one as a rookie who I think, Lewis is going to improve next year, but we're still looking at left guard and being like, oh, no solutions there after trying to collect them all.
In some ways, you can find a guy, you hopefully can find a guy through volume, but, why spend all that energy with volume when you can just go out and find a guy that you know?
Yeah. Either that or draft another good one.
Just do that again. Just keep drafting good offensive linemen. Do that.
Well, hey, it is a solution, is it not? I mean, I think the next logical conversation that stems from Russ's comments are, okay, the offensive line needs to be fixed. How do you do it?
And if you don't have a first round pick
and you don't have much for cap space,
well, they can, I've been reading up. It seems like they can create quite a bit of cap space. Although the worst idea that I saw about creating cap space is cutting Carlos Dunlap. Oh my gosh, what a horrible idea that is.
Yeah, I don't know. That person was smoking too much of the legal marijuana there in Washington. That's a stupid idea.
Like, either you pay him $14 million for 1 year, which is pretty reasonable for a pass rusher that gives you that kind of productivity, or you extend him and reduce his cap that way.
Yeah, I'm for that.
I would cut Jaron Reed over cutting Carlos Dunlap for his $14 million.
Yeah, they're pretty equal to me.
I think you can find interior guys that can give you 6 sacks.
I think you're talking a big game there, because I don't think those are
okay. You can find interior guys that can get you 4 sacks, and then by having Jamal Adams, you can make up those extra sacks.
I guess.
I'm not saying it's a great idea. I'm saying that if I had to pick one or the other, I'd be cutting Jaron Reed.
I wouldn't choose one or the other, because if I'm putting all my money somewhere this offseason...
No, I'm saying you have to choose one or the other.
Well, you're not the boss of me, and I'm not doing that. I would put it all in the trenches. I mean, when it came down to it, why am I going to give Griffin a big contract?
Oh, yeah.
Why would I spend big at corner when they develop guys left and right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now, is KJ Wright in the trenches? He feels like he kind of is, because he's strong side and he's up on the line generally.
Yes, and he's big at stopping the run. I mean, that's his best attribute, right?
Okay, I was hoping you weren't going to cut KJ. I don't want to cut him.
I don't either.
Okay. Well, actually, I don't want him to go somewhere else because he's a free agent.
Right. Well, he's still ours, even though he's not. So I like the way you put that. We're not going to cut him.
I do want to go back to Russell Wilson in one respect, though, because if there is, let's say, for instance, there is some kind of rift between Russ and Pete. And the only way I can get there is that Russ was on an MVP trajectory through the first 8 games. And then Pete said, I'm not about to go down with the worst defense in the history of the NFL. We have to change things up on offense so that my defense doesn't keep getting smoked every week and I don't go down in history as the coach with the worst defense ever. Because you can see that. And one of the things, Ray in Seattle sent in the graphic of Russell Wilson first half versus second half of the season. 71% completion percentage, had 2,500 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then in the second half, it dropped, all the way down to, 1845 in terms of passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. It's not horrible, 64% completion percentage, but definitely a disparity. And clearly, with him being the consensus MVP through the first 8 games to not getting a single MVP vote yet again, I wonder if Russ could hold that against Pete in some way.
He might. The one thing that does bug me about what Russ has to say or has been saying the last little bit here is he talks so much about legacy. That word pops out of his mouth all the time, right?
These last 2 years, it has popped out of his mouth all the time.
Yeah. And he talks about legacy. And it's like, well, okay. Is it personal legacy in terms of what your stats are that you put up? Is that what we're talking about? Are you talking about legacy? Are you talking about wins? When you're talking about legacy, are you talking about your impact on a community and what you mean to an area of the country? What are you talking about when you talk about legacy? And if it is a little bit of all those things, which part of that is the most important? Because to me, I listed it in reverse order. To me, if I'm a guy who cares about my legacy, but what an arrogant thought process to have to begin with. Like, just the idea of your legacy. I can't stand that crap to begin with. Like, you're so self-important that once you're dead and gone, like your impact on humankind is going to resonate throughout history. Like, give me a freaking break. But if we're talking about it, it's my impact and long-term effect on a community, then it's wins, and then it's personal stats. So if you're talking out of class, right, on all these interviews to try to push your way out of town, you're hurting the first part, the most important part of building a legacy.
Right.
Because what? You're going to leave Seattle where you've built all these foundations, bought into the soccer team, blah, 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 right? And move to, I don't know, Houston and start it all over again? What kind of legacy is that? Doesn't make any sense.
It definitely seems like you could build a stronger legacy being in one spot for a longer period of time and being that guy. And whether or not that leads to multiple Super Bowls or just having a huge presence in the community. Obviously, it was enough this past year to get him the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So that now is a part of his legacy. So I see what you mean, though, in terms of it's one thing to think about it and how you want to go about things and wanting to be impactful in terms of your job, in terms of what you do in your off time, in terms of what your career means. It's a little bit different to articulate it in the way he is talking about my legacy.
Yeah.
I can see how that could rub you the wrong way.
It does. It rubs me completely the wrong way because think about the guys that we think of as the all-time greats at quarterback, right? Did they stay with their team forever? No. I mean, we did just see Brady move on to Tampa, right?
Yeah.
But he was with New England for 46 decades, right? Before he moved on to Tampa. Joe Montana spent almost his entire career with the Niners and would have stayed there longer until they kicked his ass out.
Yeah, we have Steve. We have this other guy on the bench, Steve Young, that's pretty good. It's time to move to him.
Right, but neither of these guys moved on in the either beginning or middle of their primes of their careers. They weren't just like, oh, peace, catfish out. Now I'm moving on to somewhere else. The guys that do that, they look like Jay Cutler. What kind of legacy is that?
Well, if you're just looking at football examples, then yeah, you don't really have any players in any kind of era that have jumped from team to team. The one that you can point to now in basketball, though, is LeBron.
Yeah, and that's the way the NBA is now in terms of it's not about teams. People follow players, and so nobody really cares anymore. And it's because of fantasy. That's a big part of it.
And it's a smaller scale. I feel like you can do super teams on a much better scale in the NBA than you could ever do in the NFL.
Sure, you can. I honestly, there's two aspects of basketball that are really disappointing to me. And one is all these guys in their own brand. Like there's so few guys who are like, I'm a Chicago Bull or I'm a Boston Celtic or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like they're if they're going to win the championship, they're doing it, through their own natural building of a team, right? It's going to be, I'm the guy, I'm the alpha dog, I'm getting after it, and I'm going to beat these other dudes that are really awesome to win my chip, right? And now, that was the 90s. Now it's, you had
it in the early 2000s. I mean, Kobe never went anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the last of that breed, right? And now it's all, we all went and played in Cancun for a summer on the beach and all decided that we all want to go to, I don't know, Denver because we want to ski more next year. And so you get three of your other ultra talented buddies to go out there and win an empty ring there. It just rings really hollow. There's no loyalty. I don't know. It's just, you're a fan of players rather than teams. And I don't like it. I'm glad that the NFL hasn't digressed to that quite yet.
You wonder if it could go that way. Although it would be okay if Russell Wilson's bringing people to Seattle.
Sure. I mean, and you'd think that would be a pull for some players. But then again, a lot of the players that it would be a pull for the most part, are skill guys, right? And you hear reports in the media over the last few weeks like, ooh, AJ Green could be your third receiver. A lot of these really uber talented guys from 5 years ago that were really amazing that are now old. I don't want to spend money on those guys.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like it just doesn't seem like an effective way to, even if you're getting a guy like AJ Green for, I don't know, $5 million. Again, if you're not using that on the offensive line, on the defensive line, at a type of position that you really need, that you don't have that kind of depth, or you're not able to, like at corner, find those guys just about anywhere, I don't like that either. I think the focus by Russell Wilson, him moving that to the offensive line, is the right thing to do. And in fact, there was, the other reports from this past week saying that, the Eagles have spoken to the Seahawks about a trade for Zach Ertz. No thanks.
It depends on the price. I don't know what he's getting paid right now. I don't know what the contract looks like.
Let's look up Zach Ertz's contract.
All right. Great. We're prying into another man's money. I love this.
This is what we do in the offseason. This is the offseason. We look at players' pocketbooks.
Right. So depending on the contract, which you're looking up now we're talking about compensation, right? I mean, if it's next year's 6th, fine. In the contract hit isn't all that high.
I think the contract hit would be because, let's see, he restructured. I don't know. It might still be as big of a base as $8.2 million.
Yeah, no thanks. And here's why I say that. Uncle Will's going to be a year removed from all those injuries, right? I would tend to believe that what he went through is going to be a 2-year recovery. So I expect him to be better next year. And then they also went out and drafted Parkinson. Like, they didn't do that for no reason.
Right.
So you have 2 guys on the cheap there. I don't see them spending either draft capital in a trade or free agency money on tight end. I don't see that.
They might go for a veteran at about half that price. I could see them needing to fill a tight end role in terms of building out the group. You have the 2 guys, Colby Parkinson, Will Dissly. Maybe you need another rookie that you have to draft, or maybe it could be a late round dude just to have a third guy, but then having that veteran guy there too. I could see that.
I don't see that as a need. I mean, Russ isn't a tight ends guy.
But does Shaheen see it as a need?
Hard to say. We know a whole 0% about the Waldron. You know, we just don't know.
Well, moving on with one of the things that Ray talked about, because he sent me that graphic with Russell that got me thinking down that line of Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson and that dynamic. But that wasn't what Ray even had to ask. So he says, these results, looking at Russell Wilson's first half versus the second half, these results don't justify a significant offensive tactical change for the second half of the season, especially one that sacrifices its OC days after ending a franchise record-setting offense. WTF, honestly, how can this team and organization truly be all in on Pete and not shoddy? Making it to the playoffs is great. First and second round losses suck. The wins that have provided the Hawks with postseason success for the most part were either by the skin of their teeth and in no way the product of excellent coaching. The talent of this team is better than that. This team continues to conjure frustration for me in new and even more catfish ways. If their coaching plan is really all in on Pete, and they surely seem to be, then why do we have a QB earning $35 million a year? No team has won a chip with a guy under center taking this big of a slice of the salary cap pie ever. Russell Carrington Wilson needs to renegotiate or be traded. 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and an offensive lineman. Not really a question, more of unloading the weight off my chest. B-Wags at this point is a big drag on the cap. He did not deserve to be the highest paid linebacker in the game after his last 2 seasons. Kind of like parenting. I'm angry because I care. I wish none of this bothered me, but it does. The players and fans are better than this and deserve better. Ray in Seattle.
That's an interesting email because we've definitely heard that sentiment from a large segment of the 12s, right? Wags isn't worth
a segment. I don't know if it's large, but a segment.
When I say large, like a quarter of them.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a significant amount.
It's a piece of the pie that you would want to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want just a little sliver.
Pie.
Yeah, quarter of a pie.
Yeah, especially if it's pecan pie. Because that's the best pie. We all know that.
I don't know that.
No, well,
I keep thinking I should try it.
At least you've never tried pecan pie?
No, it's a nut pie.
What are you, a communist?
I want fruit in my pie. Fruit and sugar.
Yeah, you are a fruity pie kind of guy. So get back to Wags. It's funny when the team isn't dominant, right? Because of the amount of depth around the star players. If a star player is getting a little older, but still producing at the same level, if not higher, because of the money on their contract, holy cow, the knives come out for those guys. Well, Wags hasn't been, worth it the last 2 years. What? How? By what metric? Because he's producing at the same level.
Yeah, he's been all pro year after year and deserves to be paid like it.
Yes. And here's the other part of this narrative that I hear over and over again. This comes from Stat Nerd World. Well,
there's never been a quarterback who's made more than 13.8% of the salary cap that's ever won it.
Here's the thing. That's a dumb stat because that's going to be completely obliterated over the next 10 years.
Yeah,
and
as soon as
why.
Tom Brady finally leaves the NFL, you're going to start to see quarterbacks that make over 13.789% actually winning Super Bowls. Matt Ryan would have won it. Matt Ryan would have won it if not for Tom Brady.
Right. Yeah. It's a stupid number. And here, the other reason why that's a really dumb stat going forward is, does this league look like it's trending to a more offensive-centric, pass-happy league? Or by terms of the rules and the way the league wants things to go for fantasy sports and all that? Or is it becoming more of a run-heavy defense type of league because of the rules and the way that the league wants to push things? Which way is it going?
Yeah, the first one, because the second one's boring.
No, the second one's awesome, and it's not boring, but
I'm talking about for a large portion of the football audience.
Yes. So if that's the case, and we all know that more and more the game revolves around the quarterback, right? You're going to have to pay quarterbacks, and he's going to be the most important guy. So if you have one of the best quarterbacks, you luck into a few dudes through the draft to fill in the bottom of your roster, you're going to win a Super Bowl. And that's because you're not going to win Super Bowls going forward with the Nick Foleses of the world. It's just not going to happen.
Every once in a while, it's still going to happen. You're still going to be able to probably put together crazy defense every once in a while that just dominates more than any team has before. But I don't think it's going to be consistently what you can count on.
No, it'll be like once a decade. You're going to have to pay a big-time quarterback to win chips. The other argument would be, well, what you do is you get rid of the guy when you got to pay him and then draft another young, awesome, amazing QB, and you win a Super Bowl with him on the cheap. Okay, great. Like, if you are of that mentality, you've completely forgotten what life was like pre-Russell Wilson or even pre-Hasselbeck, right?
Yeah, it was, I think I was seeing the teams with the most playoff victories since 2000, and the Patriots were like double everybody else. And then there was the Seahawks, Steelers, Packers. I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. I think it was those three teams that were all tied. Oh, and the Ravens had 16. And then, yeah, the Steelers, Seahawks, and Packers, I think, had 15. So those are your teams that have had pretty consistent success over the last 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, and they've all had one thing in common, right?
Good quarterbacks.
Yeah. A good quarterback. One of your top 10
Although the Ravens,
guys.
you could kind of,
There's your exception. I mean, yeah, you probably still can win a Super Bowl with a Trent Dilfer once a decade, right? You were all
Joe
the defensive,
Flacco.
Yeah, all the defensive chips kind of fall in line, and you manage to win one with D completely.
Yeah,
right.
And then once Joe Flacco is probably a pretty good example of this, because once the Ravens paid him at the elite quarterback level, then they started to go downhill. They never really made the playoffs, at least a deep run into the playoffs after that. And then they drafted Lamar Jackson, and they were back to it. Now, Lamar's going to be one of those interesting ones too, because once you have to pay him and you can't put guys around him, that's going to be, he's kind of one of those guys that could fall toward the outside bottom part of the top 10, and you just have to make other good decisions as a franchise.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before in the past a little bit. I'm not saying you go out and you pay every quarterback franchise level money, right? One of the top deals in the league. You don't do that. If you can't look at your quarterback and say, this guy is clearly one of the top 5 guys, clearly.
Yeah.
Like season in, season out. He didn't have just one good top 5 year. He's been in that conversation year in, year out consistently. then you don't pay him, a la Dak Prescott. There's no way in hell I would pay him a monster contract because that's what he's going to demand. Is he a good quarterback? Absolutely. He's good.
Yeah, he's better than Kirk Cousins.
Sure. But I don't pay Kirk. I don't pay Dak. Yeah, I don't pay any of those guys. When they pay Goff.
Yeah, you're seeing right now what happened with Jared Goff and Carson Wentz.
Right.
Although Carson Wentz to Indy, I do like that.
Okay. I thought maybe we'd save that for the second half, but do we want to talk about that?
No, we can save it for the second half.
Because that is kind of interesting. So that's the other part of it is like, okay, well, no team's ever won paying their quarterback that much. Well, you can't pay every quarterback that much. You have to be smart about it. You have to let some dudes walk. And Russ isn't that guy.
And trading Russell Wilson for 2 firsts, 2 seconds, because those were, I actually cut clips for this because you know what, Ray? That's a great email because it segues me into one of the worst trade ideas that I have ever heard on television.
Well, I have created what I consider my masterpiece. Brandon, I'm going to run this by you. This is a 4-team NFL super trade. And you tell me who says no. The Seattle Seahawks get Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Bosa, the 23rd pick of the draft from the Jets, and the Niners' #1 pick. The San Francisco 49ers get Deshaun Watson. The Houston Texans get the 2nd pick, the 12th pick, the 34th pick, the Jets' #1 next year, and Sam Darnold. And the New York Football Jets get Russell Wilson.
This is great.
So in that scenario,
brilliant.
Sierra gets to live in New York. Brandon's going to have to do a little sales job on the Jets to Russ, but I think he can do it. The Texans get the 2nd pick of the draft, 3 other first rounders. Pete Carroll gets that play action quarterback, a defensive stud. San Francisco gets Deshaun Watson. Who says no, Brandon Marshall? 4-team super trade.
Brilliant.
Who says no, my friend?
Now, Ray's suggestion was 2 firsts and 2 seconds and an offensive lineman. But in this scenario, they do get 2 firsts. Now, it's a 23rd and then it's a 2022 first round pick from the 49ers. But you get Nick Bosa in there. So you get a guy in the trenches and you end up with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Okay. So the question that Nick Wright raises is who says no to that? And out of those teams that are listed in that trade, it's clearly the Seahawks that says no to that trade.
I've even seen 49ers fans saying no to that trade, which is baffling to me. Like, you get Deshaun Watson. Yeah. Why would you say no to getting Deshaun Watson?
You wouldn't. And
yeah, you got to give up Nick Bosa, but there's questions about his knees and you do have to give up a couple picks, I think, as the 49ers. But yeah, you don't say no to that if you're the Niners.
No,
and you say no to that as part of the Seahawks because you're giving up Russell Wilson. You're going from having the best quarterback in the division to having the worst. And then you're turning over the best quarterback in the division to the 49ers, who now have Deshaun Watson.
Right. No, that's kind of where I was going, is like, why would the Seahawks say no to this? Because A, it helps the Niners. B, you give up your franchise quarterback to get back 0 quarterbacks.
Right. A guy who's probably getting cut from the 49ers anyway. Why would you take him as part of a trade?
Why would anybody even sign him after the Niners cut him? We've seen Jimmy Garoppolo. We know what he is. He's a guy that can operate when everything is perfect around him. And even then, at this point in his career, because he's been hit around the knees so much, he can't even do that anymore. He's done. Jimmy G's done.
Terrible trade.
Terrible trade. Who would say no to it? The Seahawks. That's a stupid trade. And then not only that, but maybe Russ would say no to that. You think he wants to go and play for the freaking Jets?
At least Cowherd came up with, I think, a couple, or no, I think it was Florio that came up with a couple trade options.
God, Florio.
Yeah. Well, he's all in to sending Russ somewhere else. And he did have the Jets in there too. But at least the trade with the Jets brought Sam Darnold to the Seahawks, and it brought the 2nd overall pick to the Seahawks. And so that's one where you could kind of, you have a better quarterback than Jimmy G, and you have a pick that you could use for a quarterback if you decided to. And I think the other one was a trade with the Jags, which, obviously would be for the first pick overall. But then the Jags aren't doing that because, again, you look at any Jaguars fan and they say, well, why would we trade a first overall pick for a guy who could be the franchise quarterback for the next 20 years for a guy who's 32? And, yes, he says he's going to play till he's 45. But realistically, even if you get 8 years, like that's not the same.
It's not the same. And doesn't Russ have a no trade clause as well?
Oh, yeah. But he would waive that because he loves Brian Schottenheimer so much. He would go to the Jaguars to be with Brian Schottenheimer and Darrell Bevel.
Yeah. To go to the organization that has the worst reputation with players in the entire league.
Yeah.
And then your second option then is the next worst, the New York Jets. Like, come on. That doesn't make sense. Now, if they were to pull a trade off with the Jets that was Darnold and the number 2 overall pick, you better like Justin Fields a whole lot. You like if you're the Seahawks, right?
Yeah.
I haven't watched Fields yet, so I can't comment on it. I don't know. I mean,
well, Florio always points back, and I think you'll identify with this because he points back to the 2018 draft where the Seahawks were looking to trade Russell Wilson for the Browns, he says, for the first overall pick that then the Seahawks could have used on Josh Allen.
But they probably wouldn't have because somehow everybody thought Baker was the guy in that. And Josh Allen was like the least coveted, it seemed like, out of that draft class.
But John Schneider remember he went to the pro day for Josh Allen.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know how I felt about Josh Allen at the time. But I do have a serious question, though. Like, what's up with Florio in Seattle? Like, did he travel out there at some point and have like a terrible experience? Does he hate pine trees? Is he adverse to rain?
Yeah.
Like, does he, I mean, does he not like mountains and sound? Like, is that a problem? Does he hate the ocean? Like, why does he hate Seattle? Like, why does he want Russ out of Seattle so bad?
I wonder if it just goes because there's always that commentary about Seattle being South Alaska, right, in terms of the media landscape. But I think we've seen that go away or at least dissipate because now you have Russell Wilson being on the cover of GQ and doing the Walter Payton Man of the Year thing. So it's not like he's going unnoticed in terms of his star recognition. I think that's gone away to a certain extent of what we really did see in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, it's certainly better. And the age of the internet helps with that a lot as well, right? To where you're not
just fantasy football, to be honest.
We're not giving fantasy any credit.
I'll give them a little credit.
Boo! I don't like it. Makes me feel icky. But yes, with more voices out there that you can listen to, like our show, right? Where we're Seahawks specific. That just wasn't available 10 years ago. So I think that makes a difference as well. I did want to get back to Ray's comment regarding how can they be all in on Pete and not on Shoddy. That one surprises me a little bit too and confuses me because let's take a look at Brian Schottenheimer's track record as a coach. How many chips does he have?
Yeah.
He's been to one championship game?
Or was it 2?
I think, was he twice with the Jets?
I know that Sanchez made it twice to the championship game. Oh, so he was there for both of the Sanchez years, and he was there with Favre.
Okay, so his high point of his coaching career, as far as how far the teams he's been on have been on teams that got there despite their offense. And he's the offensive guy?
Yeah.
That's his resume. Okay, cool. And then Pete has brought not only a championship, but 2 Super Bowl appearances and the longest, most stable period of time of winning that we've ever had as an organization. And you ask, how can they be all in on Pete and not Shoddy? How could you be all in on Shoddy and not Pete? I would just flip that right back. I don't get that for the life of me.
I just think that there was a little bit of fascination with their ability to produce with the offense in the first half of the season. And I just don't know if it was completely Shoddy and Russ or a portion of that being the defenses that they played and COVID being a factor and not having a preseason, because all defenses started out relatively slow, the Seahawks included, obviously. And then the shift of defenses to play so much more cover two and the not always just cover two, but generally the two deep safeties. So I don't know if I would put that much of it on Shoddy as him being outstanding. And obviously the rest of the NFL didn't think that either, because when he got cut from the Seahawks, people weren't clamoring to make him a head coach or really even an offensive coordinator.
No, definitely not. And look, I mean, the whole idea of the two deep safety thing and it slowing down offenses the second half of the year, it wasn't just in Seattle. It was all over the league.
Right.
Look at the playoffs and all the teams that were playing cover two. And it's all because of that, the circle of football, right? I mean, it was not but a few years ago that Seattle was dominating with the LOB playing single high safety or cover three, and everybody changed to that. And so then offenses all started gearing their playbook around those Seattle beaters, right? To try to beat cover one, cover three. And then once the offenses adapted to that, now defenses went back to going to cover two, and now offenses are catching back up to be able to beat cover two. So it all just is a circle of life, a circle of football. It's just the way it works. It wasn't necessarily Seahawks specific. At least it didn't appear to me that way going down the stretch.
So it was the Favre year, and they didn't make the playoffs that year. I think, because he got hurt down the stretch.
Yeah.
And
shoulder.
And so they ended up just missing the playoffs in the end. Oh, yeah. Seattle beat them right at the end of the season. They lost 4 out of their last 5 that season. And then the 2 championship seasons were the next 2 with Mark Sanchez after that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the clamoring for Shoddy being the guy over Pete, if you're going to have a power struggle. And look, this is still a philosophical difference that Pete has with pretty much everybody on the planet and me with a majority of this fan base. And that is, look, y'all sit and poo-poo running the football and playing good defense as if that's not a way to win championships. And yet look at the last champion and tell me how that game was won.
Yeah.
Look at the last few years and how championships have been won. And everybody acts like that's a dinosaur philosophy when it's actually the winning one. But hey, who am I? I'm just some dumbass in Montana that, sees the league for what it is.
You still need to be able to do the other parts of football that make football football.
Yeah. I mean, even the great Mahomes, if his offensive line gets hurt and, he's asked to drop back and pass 75 times, is going to struggle and not win a championship.
And Russ saw that. And now he wants offensive line. So it makes all the sense.
It does.
All right. What do you say we take a break, come back into the second half of the show, and we'll talk a little bit of Carson Wentz. I know everybody's waiting for that. We got some welcome to the flock, a huge welcome to the flock segment, and do better and better at life.
Yeah.
Getting into the second half of the show, there was one Seahawks item that we didn't get to in the first half that I wanted to talk about before we get into the Carson Wentz talk. And that is that the Seahawks are adding a name to the Ring of Honor in 2021. But they haven't yet said who it is.
Okay, because I had missed that story.
Yeah. So who should it be? Now, if you want to go back far, because it seems obvious now that we should start getting into the Mike Holmgren era of players, right?
Yes.
It seems like it's time. But Joe Nash isn't in the Ring of Honor yet. And that's one guy who is surprising to me that's not there.
Yes, 100%. I would have to see the list, actually. I guess I don't know off the top of my head who all is in the Ring of Honor.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, I have some obvious guesses to, a number of players. But
well, let's start with the most recent one was Paul Allen. And then you have the next most recent was Walter Jones. So you do have one Holmgren era player in there. He did predate the Holmgren era slightly, right? Because 97. No, that was right at the start of the Holmgren era.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the only one. Because up until Jones, the most recent induction was Cortez in 2006.
Right.
Chuck Knox was 2005. Dave Craig was 04. Easley was 2002. And then your 90s era, well, you can even go back into the 80s. It was Steve Largent in the 80s. 92, you had Pete Gross, the previous Seahawks announcer, Dave Brown. I'm saying, I wasn't saying that for you, just for people who don't recognize the name Pete Gross. He was the previous.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, right. That's who Pete Gross was. Yeah, it was a good reminder for me.
Yeah. Jacob Green was in 95.
Okay.
Let's see. Jim Zorn. I hadn't mentioned him yet. Kurt Warner. That's your list.
Yeah, it feels like it needs to be a Holmgren era guy, right? I mean, I guess short of Nash, but I mean, you would think that would have happened by now if it was gonna.
It's surprising for the guy who played the most snaps in a Seahawks uniform. Except, did Max Strong beat his? Did he overtake him?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Say. I will say that out of the Holmgren era players, right, guys to be in the Ring of Honor, I mean, Walter Jones for sure.
Yeah,
and then, like, I mean,
well,
you could make a Hasselbeck argument that I would totally accept. You could make a Sean Alexander argument.
Easy.
Yeah.
You could make the Sean Alexander argument because of the guys. Well, the easiest argument to make is Mike Holmgren himself, because of what he meant to the franchise. And
could be the big show.
He should be in the Hall of Fame someday. I can make an argument for why Sean Alexander should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if Matt Hasselbeck, he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame, but he is obviously, he eclipsed the records of Jim Zorn and Dave Craig, who are both already in the Ring of Honor. So if you're doing
second best quarterback in franchise history, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other guy I could make an argument for from the Holmgren era, a guy who spent his entire career in a Seahawks uniform, Marcus Trufant.
As a Ring of Honor guy?
Yeah. Because most of these guys are guys who they played their whole career in Seattle for the most part, and were impactful players.
I guess out of all the dudes you just talked about, and you were mentioning Hall of Fame, and we're talking about Ring of Honor, right?
Right.
I would say the only two guys that I would consider would be Holmgren and Hasselbeck. I mean, I'm one of those people, and I mean, I like Sean Alexander, the person, just fine. He's a nice enough guy. You know, I appreciate that he put up numbers in a system with players around him that totally produced for him. I feel very much about Sean Alexander the same way I feel about Emmitt Smith.
I know.
Totally celebrated, amazing guys, all these numbers, and they were 50% of the reason. I mean, I just don't see the transcendent talent there. It always bothered me the way that he ran for being such a big dude. It just never felt like he ran with that kind of power.
He did when it was inside the red zone, though. When Sean Alexander was inside the red zone, he was scoring touchdowns.
So he was the one who carried the ball across the goal line, but Walter Jones and Steve Hutchinson were scoring touchdowns.
We can have this whole argument now, but I know where you come out on it. I know where I come out on it. Sean Alexander inside the red zone was, that alone to me, his ability to score touchdowns, I think he deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame for that. As prolific as he was, being a league MVP, I think he deserves it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to convince you, but that's fine.
Look, I'll put it to you this way. So are we talking Hall of Fame or Ring of Honor? You seem to keep bouncing back
Ring of Honor, but I'm saying if a player is worthy of the Hall of Fame, then he also deserves to be in the Seahawks Ring of Honor.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
Because you have Easley, Kennedy, Largent, Jones.
Right.
The 4 Hall of Famers are in.
Correct. Okay. So, I mean, if Alexander makes the Hall of Fame and or the Ring of Honor, I'm not going to be mad about it. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't be mad about it. It's not like I think he's totally unworthy or anything like that. Just if I'm really looking at it, I mean, if I'm going to compare, say, even just Kurt Warner to Alexander, right? Like, I would take Kurt Warner every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Sure.
If you were to take Marshawn versus Alexander. I'm taking Marshawn every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, I want Marshawn in the Ring of Honor.
Right. Yeah, I just think that they were more impactful as players than Alexander was. I think he was a nice piece.
Okay.
And a fortunate time. A lot like Terrell Davis. Very similar guys.
And it's because Terrell Davis made it to the Hall of Fame that I can say that Sean Alexander definitely deserves to be there.
Okay, fine. Ask Terrell Davis, and he doesn't think he deserves to be in. I'm just saying.
The player can think that all he wants.
I guess a guy that we probably won't have to worry about going forward being in the Hall of Fame or even having this discussion is Carson Wentz. Is that where we're at now?
Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts this past week.
Yeah, this is my favorite question to ask you all the time, apparently. When you saw the badge alert pop up on your phone, gut reaction.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
The one place where I could see Carson Wentz going and having success as a quarterback is one, pairing him back with his former coach in Frank Reich, and also putting an offensive line in front of him that's pretty good. And he's got a running game. I don't know about the receivers so much, but yeah, I think he'll have a good enough offense around him to allow him to have some success in Indy.
Yeah, my gut reaction was, ooh, this is fun. And the reason why was, number one, it's not an NFC, so who cares? But also, I think this is the thing that we're going to be able to point at in 4 years or so and say, Frank Reich, genius. Frank Reich, a little overrated. Like this is where we're gonna find out right here. Because if he can get productive seasons out of Jacoby Brissett and 75-year-old geriatric Phil Rivers, you would think he could take a guy that he had on an MVP trajectory early in his career and get him to be at least in the conversation moving forward in the next couple of years, especially with all those assets around him. A solid defense, a good offensive line. T.Y. Hilton is a great skill position guy. Skill position guys are a dime a dozen anymore with the way college is. They can surround him with a few more skill guys. Like, that shouldn't be that difficult.
I think Hilton's a free agent too, but whether or not they bring him back.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they can't with Carson's number at this point. But the one question I have about Wentz is really the leadership aspect of things. I mean, you hear people talk about Wentz's lack of leadership skills and how that really sank him in the eyes of the franchise and the eyes of his fellow players. Now, it'll be very interesting to see how the Colts as a team respond going from P. Rivers, who was really universally accepted by football dudes as one of the more beloved leaders and quarterbacks that you could play with, to Carson Wentz, who's apparently Captain Ego at all times. And maybe his ego's a little more in check now that he's been jettisoned by a team. I don't know, maybe.
And that would speak to the quality of coach that Frank Reich is, if he can deal with that in some way that ends up making it work for the team.
I think they're in the mix for 2 of the next 4 AFC championship games going forward. I do. I'm a Frank Reich believer. I really am.
I'm a Frank Reich believer. I just don't know if Carson Wentz can be the guy that can, if he can return to his 2019 form that brought the Eagles to the playoffs. And you think about that 2019 Eagles team down the stretch, they really didn't have anybody. He had a couple dudes on the offensive line, but in terms of weapons, all his receivers were hurt. They were playing with 4th and 5th round draft picks at running back, and they didn't have a whole lot. So 2019 Carson Wentz was pretty good. It was just this last year, 2020, that fell short.
I don't know that that's really completely his fault. I mean, offensive line was banged up all year. The weapons in Philly have been atrocious. They've been terrible in the draft, drafting weapons. And I think, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't know anybody, all that, right? I think that the last 2 years, once Reich was gone, or the last 3, however many years he's been in Indy now, I guess it's been 3, Carson Wentz sat and watched Doug Peterson in action and realized this guy's all suit and no substance. And by the time that last year rolled around, he was playing in spite of Doug Peterson, right? Like, hey, this is what I want you to do, this, and this. And he's like, we've been trying that crap for the last 2 years. It doesn't work. You're an idiot, and you can't get us to, be any better with this system that you stole from Frank Reich, but don't know really how to run. I'm going to take this on and try to make us a winner.
Yeah,
I think that's where that came in, and then that got played off as, oh, Carson Wentz, it's all ego. He can't be a team guy. And I think really it was him being like, Doug Peterson's a freaking moron. I can't play the way that he wants me to play.
That could be part of it.
That's my tinfoil hat conspiracy of the day, right?
Well, and I think that there's reason to buy into that just because the Eagles playing in such a poor division and finishing at the bottom of such a poor division this past year, it's got to be more than just Carson Wentz stinks. And when it's more than that, you have to look at coaching.
Yes. So this goes to the flip side of the conversation. The Eagles going forward. How do you feel about that? I mean,
not good. I mean, they did pick up our offensive coordinator, that the disciple of Frank Reich, to bring him back to Philly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the Syrian army did not sound like it was a formidable force in his first press conference.
His first press conference did not seem to go well.
It's a little weak, but yeah. But hey, who knows? I guess to me, it's the idea that they looked at Hurts and they're like, yeah, let's do this.
You think that's who they're going to roll with this next season? I mean, they're going to have to. I don't think that they're going to find...
You don't think they're going to draft a guy? You don't think they take the next North Dakota State guy?
Maybe.
He's got an interesting game. I mean, because he played a game last year. I watched a little of his stuff from the year previous, and I mean, there's talent there. He's super duper raw.
Well, then maybe you do roll with Hurts and you see what he can do in the future. Yeah, they do have the 6th overall pick, so they could... Obviously, they'll have a chance to draft a quarterback.
Trey Lance,
there.
Is that the kid's name?
I think so.
Yeah. Then there's the BYU kid, Wilson, Bizarro Wilson. I still haven't watched his stuff yet either, so I don't have an opinion on him yet either. But I do have an opinion on Jalen Hurts, and it's fairly widely known on the podcast. Tough to win games when you don't have a quarterback playing quarterback.
He did better than I thought he would do this past season. I thought he would come in and coming in behind Carson Wentz, that he would look like a worse Carson Wentz, and he was okay.
Yeah. So
they should have made that move sooner, but it's probably more due to his mobility than really anything.
Exactly. And is his mobility elite level mobility?
It's good enough to get him out of some jams.
Yep. So let's look at a guy who does have elite level mobility. And when he got put into the starting lineup was a guy that really opened eyes, right? And that's Lamar Jackson. And then you've seen the league catch up with a guy that has elite physical attributes to really scare a defense. And the league still caught up to that guy. A guy that's just good enough to get out of some jams, but really isn't a great thrower of the football.
They're going to figure him out.
That guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to figure him out right quick.
Well, I suppose that's kind of, I don't know. I was trying to come up with a comp in my mind.
For Hurts?
Yeah. Manziel, maybe?
No, Manziel. I mean, the
Manziel
leadership
could throw
part,
a little more, didn't have, yeah, Hurts has leadership like coming out of his backside, which Manziel doesn't have.
Right.
But in terms of mobility, throwing ability, I'd probably give the edge to Manziel.
Yeah. He's not as good throwing the football as Tyrod.
Yeah.
Similar mobility, at least at peak Tyrod, right?
Sure.
I'm not a Hurts believer, and he's a very nice guy. I mean,
he's awesome.
A really good dude. I mean, I don't want to trash the guy. I'm just saying, as an NFL quarterback,
Speaking of some people we don't have to trash, how about we welcome some new members of the flock?
This is exciting. You texted me earlier in the week and was like, dude, I don't know what we did, but
we did something on the last show.
We did something right. Yeah.
Well, let's start off by thanking our executive producers, Dustin Mock, Brian Shaw, and Young Choi. And welcome to the flock to Ryan Davis, who came in at 145.44. That's 12.12 for the whole year. And because he's in for the whole year, we did mention last week that we were sending out the stainless steel pint glasses to those who upped their game to the whole year at the $5 and above level. So that gets Ryan into that as well.
Yeah.
So welcome to the flock to Ryan. And Ryan writes in, this is directed at you, Adam. Should have got a Chevy.
Well, I could have. And then instead of the transfer case, I'd be chasing electrical gremlins. And those are even harder to deal with. So, and not only that, but if I did have a mechanical problem and I owned a Chevy, then I'd have to do something like, if I were changing the spark plugs, pull the entire engine because their engineers are stupid as hell and make everything entirely impossible to work on. So, yeah, I could have.
No, you should have, according to Ryan.
Yeah. But welcome to the flock, Ryan. It's going to be nice having you in the Ring of Honor and needle me all day, every day. Yeah. And it'll be fun. Yeah.
Yep. He already came into the Facebook group, so glad to have Ryan there. Thank you to David Sanborn, who came in with $50 via PayPal. So thank you to David.
Dude, awesome. Really appreciate that, man.
And Stephen Kirkpatrick came in once again via Zelle. He shows up via Zelle every once in a while, came in with $50.12. So thanks to Stephen.
Yeah. That Zelle thing, like, I always get it confused with Zillow. Those are different.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Zillow is for real estate. Zelle is for banking.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there's probably some other Z things too, but those are the ones I know.
Zumba.
Joe Bracamonte came in at $3 a month. And then Joe came in and he decided to up from $3 all the way to $36 for the entire year. So Joe came in for the whole year and said, hey, Brandon and Adam, I just wanted to let you know I am no longer a freeloader and the guilt I carried is gone and I feel great. Go Hawks.
Joe, I'm very excited that your Hawker feels cleansed and that you feel free to, continue to soar with your Seahawks fandom going forward. And yeah, all it took was giving us money. And so thanks, Joe.
Well, you know what it is? I think it really has to do with having that feeling that you're getting value in some way from listening to the show, whatever it is, and then returning that value back to us. There's a transaction there that's going full circle, and it makes you feel good.
It does. It really does work out well. And yeah, it's not just the value of the show, right? Like, you get in the Ring of Honor, there's a value there. I mean, that's a whole nother group of friends that all of a sudden now you have, and they're your friends now.
Totally works out. So yeah. We have the Discord group, and people are welcome to, it's the off season. So I've seen some people bumping around in the Discord group a little bit too.
Oh,
I don't check it out as much. It's mainly for game day. And I know when free agency hits and when draft hits, I'll be in there more, but
draft day.
Yeah, definitely be doing stuff there. Garrett Strong Banks came in at $18 a year Canadian, and I think this is because Garrett wants the uncatfished episodes, because he's been coming in other ways, but he went in specifically through Patreon, and I think that's why.
Look, I understand where Garrett's coming from, because I'll tell you what, when I'm talking and the words that are catfish comes out, like, it has flow, and I can see how that would be a lot better being uncatfished to the ear.
You've kept this show relatively clean so far. Like, to this point.
Yeah, I'm not mad this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe no uncatfished show this week.
Well, I'll probably drop one or two and a do better.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. It's pretty rare that you get through a do better without dropping one.
Yeah. I mean, I might not. I don't know. I don't pre-plan this. I don't pre-plan this.
Catfish! Great. There we go. Craig Charnock came in at also $18 Canadian for the year. So welcome to the flock to Craig.
That's awesome. So I got a question, Brandon. When they come in Canadian dollars, do you have to do the conversion? Does the computer do it for you? Or do they do it before it comes from Canada to here?
I think.
Like, how does that work?
Well, Patreon set up something new so they can take currency from the individual countries and then they do the conversion. And so
nice.
I think just to get in at the bottom level for Canadian, they charge $1.50 a month. And I don't have any control over that because I just set it as $1.
I see.
And like I said last episode, if people are coming in at $1, it really is better to go in for the whole year because of the fees.
It
comes out all at once.
Are we like a free trade podcast? Like we can take money from any country, anywhere, at any time?
Patreon is apparently. Because
That's
they'll
cool.
take, I think, just in this last week or so, I've seen Canadian money, British money, Australian money. And I know that they take euro. So, yeah, along with dollars. So, those are the ones I know of.
Cool. Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing something in yen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've always wanted some yens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some yens. I don't think it's plural, but we'll go with it.
Well, it is now. Don't worry, Japanese folks. I'll butcher the pronunciation, how your currency is said. Yeah, that's what I do.
That's what he does. Chris Willison comes in at 12 pounds and says, "Great show, guys. I found it very touching what you said about the late, great Chris Wessling. I'm a big fan of Around the NFL podcast, and it was really great what you did. You guys are amazing, and keep it up."
Yeah, appreciate it, man. I mean, I think Brandon for sure, but both of us, that's one of those things that kind of hits you. And then not only that, but even though we never met or spoke with Chris, like anybody who's doing podcasts out there, you kind of feel a connection with them to a degree, right? It's kind of a big family that way.
Especially if you've been around for 8+ years, it kind of feels like you came up through some of the not all the way back to 2004 with the original pioneering days when they had to build their own RSS feeds and people had to download it to their iRivers or whatever the original podcast devices were. But, still kind of the earlier days of podcasting-ish.
Yeah. You do. You feel like you've been on a journey with those folks as well, as we've all kind of figured out this technology.
There's winging it that's involved when you first started.
Yeah, we're still winging it. It's great.
That's the nature of podcasting. I wish more people getting into podcasting would know that winging it is a big part of it. Because I've seen people out there go, well, you got to have 10 episodes locked in. You got to have a plan of where you're going. You got to, there's so much planning. No, just start it, work it out as you go, and you figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, you quit. And that's why there's podcasts out there with, 6 or 7 episodes where people go, whoa, this is actually hard. And then they stop.
Yeah. Yeah. No, just there's nothing to it but to do it. It's really the biggest thing of it, right? I feel like the modicum of success that we've had is just because we do it, not because it's exceptional or that we're really any good at it. It's more just the fact that we just keep doing it. And we're wearing people down. We're basically the Glacier of Seahawks podcasts.
I like that. The tagline, the Glacier of Seahawks podcast.
Yeah.
Stephen Wall came in, and this is with the Australian dollars, $1.50 a month. So welcome to the flock to Stephen.
Dude, appreciate it, man. Down under. How this is summer for them. So all these stories of America frozen, they're doing the opposite right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a better year though, because last year this time it was all the fires.
Yeah. Well, you burn all the fuel away. There's nothing else to light on fire.
It's true. They should be good for a little while now.
You would hope. Yeah.
Welcome to the flock to Stephen, and Aaron Fisher came in with a raise. So now we're getting into raises. That was all of our new members, but because last month I mentioned that if you move to the annual, I'll upgrade you to the next. So if you come in at $1, then if you go for the whole year, then you get stickers. If you come in at $3, which is usually the level I send stickers, you go for the whole year, then I'll send a patch because that's the level at $5. And then $5 and above, I throw in the stainless steel pint glasses,
which were super cool.
And so Aaron came in with his upgrade to $145.44 for the whole year. Says, hey guys, as there have been the recent discussions around improving our O-line, I have been curious if you two think we could see the Seahawks go guard again in either the draft or free agency and move Lewis to center full-time, or in some kind of timeshare with another guard/center convert we pick up in free agency or in late rounds. He looked pretty good in the one game he filled in at center, and now with a full season under his belt and seems like Russ really likes him, seems like a move to consider. Thanks, and as always, go Hawks. Aaron Fisher from Las Vegas.
Dude, Aaron with the next level thinking. I'd kind of forgotten already that Lewis filled in at center for one game. And wasn't that the game against the Rams and he had to take on Aaron Donald?
Was it that game or was it the Jets game that he played at center?
I feel like in my gut that it was the Rams game. But whether that's a true fact, I'm not sure.
Okay. Give me a minute. I'm going to look it up.
Okay.
Seahawks give rookie Damian Lewis a surprise start at center, performs well in win over Arizona. That's the NBC
Arizona.
News headline.
Okay. I knew I hated
So it was a
the team.
division rival.
So, yeah, and he did hold his own for being kind of a surprise start and all that. I mean, maybe there's something to that. But as
I'd
far
keep him
as
at guard. I'd keep him at guard. Spend the money on a real center.
I'd be stunned if the Seahawks don't do something important at guard and center.
And if they decide, I could see him going another way too, and thinking maybe a guy like Alex Mack, who is getting up there. Maybe you get one more good year out of him, bringing him in. And so they do the short-term option there. They do a more longer-term signing at left guard, or bringing back Justin Britt for a year.
Yeah, we could get some buttermilk pancakes out there. That'd be cool.
I'm just one game. I'm not completely sold on Damian Lewis being the guy at center.
No, it's just an interesting thought. I think that was outside the box thinking by Aaron.
Oh, yeah.
It was good stuff.
Yeah. John Fremont, he came in and upped from $1 a month to $12.12 for the whole year. So thanks to John.
Hell yeah, man.
Roger came in for the full year, up to $60 from the $5 level. So I'll be sending some cups across the ocean to Roger.
So basically the cups came from China on a boat, and now we're going to send them back across the ocean on another boat.
But
Or
these
is
are
it a
going to
different
Europe.
ocean?
So they're going to make almost the full circle around the globe.
Wow. So not only do you get Seahawkers podcast stainless steel beer cups, but they are world traveling Seahawkers podcast stainless steel beer cups.
Heck yeah.
Huh.
And Hank Sink came in and, he gave us a raise from $1 a month all the way up to $36 for the whole year. So,
Oh, wow.
Hank's been around so long, I might have to
Yes.
send him more than just the patch. Might send
I
a
like
little
where your
extra.
head's at on that. Yeah, for sure.
And Russ came in all the way up to the annual pledge of $36. So thanks to Russ and Alexander Ernst. Oh, here we go. There is the euro that he moved from $3 up to 36 euro. Euros?
Myros.
I think you actually do pluralize euros, don't you?
Yeah. Like Greece is billions of euros in debt.
That's the quick way to remember it.
Right. Yeah.
Alexander sends in an email, says, "Hey, Brandon and Adam, I didn't actually know that the yearly payment works way better for you. So when I heard that during the last episode, I decided to change my subscription to a yearly one. Cheers from Berlin, Germany. Thanks for all your work that helps keep people sane during that time. I really enjoy looking back to the London game and having had the chance to meet all of you there. So hope we can do that again soon, or even better. Why not come to Berlin instead and play a game here? Spoiler alert, I'd say the Hawks are the most popular NFL franchise here in Germany, so be prepared for an even bigger home field advantage than in Wembley."
Alexander, wow, that's interesting. I would not have guessed that the Seahawks are the most popular. And I wonder why that is. Like, how is it because of time zones of some kind? Like, did the Seahawks games end up being played later in the day so you pick up more fans?
I don't know.
Like, because it works out with when you would normally be. I don't know what the difference is, what time it is in Berlin when the Seahawks are usually playing, but is it better than or easier to watch that than if you were, say, trying to watch an East Coast team?
It may just have to do with the Seahawks' strong fan bases in, the different countries, because there's a huge group of UK Seahawkers.
Yeah.
I do know that based on where the downloads come from, it's US, Canada, UK, and then I think Australia and Germany are the 4 and 5 spots.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always blows me away. I'd be totally down to go to Berlin for a game.
Oh, yeah. Berlin, Hamburg, Frankfurt.
Yeah. All the big German cities.
Leipzig. Let's see. What other German cities do I know?
I don't know. Where did this come from? Where did German
Dresden.
geography fit into? Yeah, Dresden. Yeah, there you go.
Dresden.
Dresden. Because you know so much about German cities, I thought in honor of you, they should change Dresden to Bresden in honor of Brandon, your first name.
Yeah. No, you're combining Berlin and Dresden, one of the two.
Whatever.
Yeah. Stuttgart.
Yeah. Now you're just looking them up on the internet.
It's because I took German in high school. I still remember some of those.
Oh, I guess I forgot you took German in high school.
Yeah, welcome to the flock. I'm glad we got to finish it with a run on German cities.
There we go. Hey, I do have to say to all the little flockers, though, like, oh my God, thank you. Like, this was a really big week for me because I did a job a week and a half ago or so. And it was at one of the sketchier big corporate mills that we go to where like I can kind of get away with doing whatever I need to do to get a job done.
Yeah.
And I don't get safetied to death. Even there this last week, like all of a sudden we did 6 hours of safety orientation before we even got started. And then they tried to make it so I couldn't do the things I needed to do the job. And it kind of hit me that this wheel grinding thing and travel in the nation, working in sawmills, I think it's got a shelf life of about another 2 years tops. So if we can get the donations up, that'd be really cool because I don't see my normal gig being a long-term deal anymore.
Well, let's try and get this to a point in the next couple of years where Adam can not have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah. I need this to become my full-time gig. So let me know what I need to do.
Yeah. Well, I did see one question asking, at what point we get 2 shows a week. And so when, because we did that for 1 year, but then I think the wheel grinding picked up to the point to where we couldn't really do that. So yeah, I think once you've got wheel grinding season out of football season, that's when we can do 2 shows a week.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if we get to the point to where I'm making the kind of money where I'm really not grinding, then hell yeah, I'll do 2 shows a week. No problem. I'm down.
Well, one other really good reason why it was nice to have such a big week of people coming in with the support is that after the season, I start sending out prizes to all of the Pick'em winners. It's good to have shipping funds. And so I got a package on the way to Christian in Norway because he was our first place winner with the top prize. And he selected a DK Metcalf autographed football for the top prize.
Solid choice.
Daniel Weinholtz was second place, and he picked the Keegan Hall, those pencil drawings.
Dude, those are sweet.
I know. We had the Russell Wilson one, which was the top prize. He did the moment of Shaquem Griffin and Shaquille Griffin celebrating after Shaquem's first NFL sack.
Yeah.
And so it's a pencil drawing of that, and it's signed by both Shaquille and Shaquem and Keegan Hall, the artist.
Hell yeah, man. That's awesome.
So that was...
Daniel's going to dig that, man.
And then Jonathan Burkholder in third place. He picked the Doug Baldwin autographed football from Doug's rookie year. So 3 great prizes all up at the top.
Yeah.
And
solid choices.
And those are as far as I've gotten with the prizes so far. So the people waiting to hear from me, Fernando Tejada was in 4th place. Van Isle Hawk Fan was in 5th place. Once more into the breach. Mark, he was in 6th. 7th place, Sexy Deep Balls. Amy from Squim came in at 8th for Raka for Never. We got Santiago, who was Sideline Sockeye. He came in 9th. And then we had 2 people at 10th. So I'm going to go all the way down to 11th place for prizes. Fire Emoji at 10 and Unlimited Hawkra. Jeff in Bainbridge Island got 11th.
Okay. Well, I didn't know how far that was going to go. I mean, what is this? Is this a millennial-driven podcast? Like, are we going to give a participation trophy to like everybody who made picks?
I did do another James Harrison Participation Award this year too, because Daniel donated another one of the buck knives, and made a nice little box for it for the James Harrison Participation Trophy. So I have to find out a way that we're gonna give that away. Maybe I'll do it like the Tiny Pieces of Seahawks stuff. So for this month, instead of Tiny Pieces of Seahawks stuff, it'll be the James Harrison Participation Trophy Award, but you have to have participated in the pick'em to get the award. So I think instead of commenting "Go Hawks," I'll have people comment with their team name from the pick'em.
Dude, you're a genius sometimes. Like, you come up with these things. Was that on the fly?
That was on the fly.
Wow. Yeah, I'm impressed because that's not usually your nature, and you did real good there. Yeah.
Well,
I'm impressed.
Yeah, you reminded me of the knife that Daniel sent me. I have the tiny pieces of Seahawks stuff from January that I've forgotten so far to give this away, and we did it. We did the pre-show giveaway, and it went to Jonathan Stein.
Oh yeah. Jonathan is definitely worthy of a little bit of Seahawks stuff.
Oh yeah,
a tiny piece of it.
He'll get a tiny piece of Seahawks stuff, and then the tiny piece that I was going to give away that I had on my desk, I'll save that for April.
Okay.
So tinypiecesofseahawksstuff.com if you want to get in on that, or if you're a member of the Ring of Honor, there is a Facebook post there. You can comment with your team name, and you'll be entered to win the James Harrison Participation Trophy for 2020.
There we go. Okay.
So if you haven't heard from me about shipping a prize, I will be sending the prize list starting at number 4 now and going the rest of the way down.
See, I didn't know how many prizes you were going to hand out, because I'm in very much of the camp of if the Olympics only gives out 3 medals, then everything else is only 3. Like, you can only give out, top 3.
Yeah, well, I still have prizes is the thing.
I see. Okay.
I have 2 buck knives that Daniel sent from last year and this year. I have a Cliff Averill autographed football. I have some Fanatics gift cards. I have some Super Bowl 48 programs still. I have our stainless steel pint glasses. I have the handmade fly fishing lures from John the Bard still.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I've got autograph photos from J.R. Sweezy and Robert Turbin.
Okay, that's pretty cool, too. All right. Well, Brandon, if you want to make it rain with prizes, far be it for me to stand in your way. So have at it. I have it filling up my room. If you be the Pac-Man Jones making it rain in a strip club of the Seahawks podcast world. You be that guy.
I want to be that guy. All right. Well, before we get into some do better and better at life, here is a note from Jake, aka Daddy 3 Times from the Flock. Says, "Hey guys, I just wanted to say that with all this Russell drama brewing and whatnot, I hate to admit that I was falling for the clickbait and starting to feel some type of way about the main man, Russ. Then I listened to the podcast this week, and as you guys usually do, you brought me back. I'm grateful for your guys' analysis on the TMZ drama of this early offseason, and I'm now looking forward to seeing how the Hawks maneuver this offseason and get us back into championship form. Take care, fellas. Go Hawks."
Yeah, go Hawks, Jake. Yeah, I did feel like there wasn't many folks out there really breaking it down, and especially with the way that Brandon did it and bringing out the full clips and putting stuff in context and really being like, okay, what are people really saying here? Like, I think the best example of that is the Brandon Marshall quote.
Yeah.
He's looking for a classy way to get out, but then at the end of it, he's like, no, I mean, not get out of Seattle.
I like to track down the whole interviews, and whether it's sports or other things, there's so many times where you see the one clip that makes you, it starts getting your blood boiling a little bit, and you go and you watch the full thing, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm really good at doing that with everything else in life, right? Being like, oh, that's an interesting quote. I wonder what that is in the full, breadth of what they were saying, right?
Yeah.
I'm not getting too high or too low about it, just off a headline or things like that. When it comes to Seahawks football, that's where I'm not good at it. And, I see something like Brandon Marshall say that. I'm like, what the catfish? Because, he hasn't been here for 2 years. And we had a cup of coffee here when he was here.
Yeah.
Blah. Like, that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were. So
no, that's what I'm saying. I'm just glad you were here.
Well, and even the Dan Patrick interview to an extent, too, because I think a lot of what Russ said in the second half when he was talking about his offensive line was informed by the first part of the discussion when they were talking about Patrick Mahomes and the Super Bowl and the protection. So it really did all lead to that. And I think there are things that people can be upset about with Russ based on, if they really do think that he was, quote unquote, throwing the offensive line under the bus, then your definition of throwing somebody under the bus is, pretty, especially when he's praising Dwayne Brown and you're just saying that it needed to be better. I don't know.
Yeah, if he threw the offensive line under the bus, it would be much like, have you ever been driving down the road and a squirrel hops out in front of you and there's nothing you can do? Like, you're going over the squirrel. Like, it's just a matter of how many tires/axles you're hitting them with, right?
Yeah.
And usually when you throw somebody under the bus, you can feel it. It's both axles as you go right over. This was more like Russ driving over top of that squirrel, and then you look up in the rearview mirror and you see him pop his head up and be like, "Whoo, that was close." He drove the bus over him, but he didn't hit anybody.
And a lot of that was because the way the question was asked and that was another reason why I tried to include the Dan Patrick questions in that, because he's like, Russ, holy smokes, 400 sacks. That's really bad.
Yeah.
And so, okay, now he's thrown you into the situation where you have to now swerve out of the way of the offensive lineman that Dan Patrick just asked you about, because inherently in the question of being sacked 400 times, it's going to go back to the offensive line. So,
yep, no doubt about it.
But it's Russ turning it up from 3 to 4 on a scale of 10.
Hey, it just makes sense to me.
Last one here. JC Stringer comes in, says, can we have a competition for best rant of the year by Adam, obviously? Thank you for all you do for us, especially in the long off season. Go Hawks, from JC.
That's fun.
JC throwing me under the bus.
Yeah. Well,
best rant by Adam, obviously, because Brandon's not good at it.
Yeah. Well, let's just say we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? When it comes to the show. I just sat and gave you a bless me fest all over how you put everything into context and really did a good job for us when I was doing a poor job. It just so happens when it comes to outrage, apparently that's more my deal.
It is your strength. I agree with JC. I had to give her a little ribbing for that.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure somebody could come up with what they thought were the more fun rants, I guess, from the year. I don't know.
Well, Kofi did that video a while back of the YouTube video of some of your rants from the past.
That was actually really well done, because I had forgotten about half that crap that I'd said too. So yeah,
maybe we could bring back some of that.
Yeah,
just to replay some of those even.
Okay. Yeah. Have a trip down memory rant lane.
Yeah. Or if people in the off season are going back and listening to old shows and they come across a gem, send it my way.
There we go. All right.
So thanks to JC. What do you say we get into some do better and better at life?
All right, man. Well, I'll start out with do better here. And this probably isn't going to be in the top however many rants from this year at all, even though there's only been, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Because this really isn't all that ranty, but my do better this week is for the grid. I'm sitting here, I'm watching half the country have grid issues all year long. And it just makes me think how stupid it is that we still operate with having our electricity distributed through a grid. It's the dumbest thing in the world. Can you think, if you were to try to figure out the most inefficient, most accident-prone distribution network for energy, or the way to get energy to each and every home, I can't think of one that is more vulnerable to having things catfished up than this stupid-ass grid. Oh, there's a little bit of ice, grid down. Oh, it got hot, grid down. Oh, it got windy, grid down. Pretty much, if anything goes wrong in the slightest fashion, weather-wise on the extremes, grid down. And then all of a sudden, everybody's screwed because they have no idea how to live without electricity, or even to produce a little bit of their own so that they're comfortable, right?
Yeah.
The grid is stupid. And as I sit up here in my little Unabomber cabin in the middle of the woods and produce my own electricity from the solar panels, guess what I'm never out of? Freaking power. It's snowing right now. right now it is snowing. And I'm looking at my little gauge. Well, I've got all the podcast stuff plugged in, the fridge is running, all this other stuff. And you know what I'm doing? Still generating power when it's snowing and cloudy. Everybody has these stigmas and ideas about what solar can and can't do. And it really doesn't make a lick of sense. And for our society and our government to not have made a shift to where we're, as small communities, having microgrids, right? Where there's a lot less opportunities for failure, or to at least be generating power at your own place for your own consumption that you can control, to keep doing this archaic grid bullshit. Catfish! America, do better.
This was all just an Adam Emmert humble brag of, oh, look at me. I'm on solar power. I'm off the grid up in the mountains.
Nope. And I know it looks that way. And I can totally see that. I actually care about this passionately. Like, it really does frustrate the hell out of me to see so many people struggling, whether it was, the California fires not long ago, or now down south with all the cold, and just not having like the ability to charge your devices and have some lighting for the night and be able to watch a show, right? While you're,
or just to keep your fridge on.
Well, whatever it is.
Although you should be able to take, if it's super cold, you should be able to take some of your groceries outside.
Yeah, pro Northern tip. And I'm not even bagging on the South for not being able to handle just a little bit of cold, even though I really kind of wanted to. But like they
I'm glad you're not,
don't.
Because we have a lot of listeners in Texas, and I've been thinking about them this past week.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, it's not what they normally have to deal with, right?
No.
And just the idea of pretty much, I've been through Texas a handful of times now, and I think I could say with some certainty that the majority of Texas towns are built along a creek or a river, right? And so if you had a filter, you just go down with a jug and fill it up and then filter it through, and you got water.
Right.
A decent filter to do such things will cost you no more than $50 just to have in the closet. Like, yeah, then there's the whole conversation of a little lack of preparedness, and that's a whole nother like topic. But
it's had me thinking about solar for me too, because I've lost power for 12, 14 hours at a time, even here this past year, and thinking, oh geez, if I had a couple solar panels that were charging a battery that could at least keep appliances on and going for some of those long power outages, maybe I should have something like that.
Well, and that kind of goes to a whole nother thing, is the way that our appliances work for the most part aren't super compatible with solar. Like running a full-size fridge off of a fairly affordable like backup solar system, that ain't happening.
Oh, really?
Like, no. But as far as for say $300, you could have something that fits in your closet, like 2 panels and a little box, and you could run the little panels outside and plug them into the box, and you have something that would run your tablets and cell phones and maybe a computer, maybe the TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the majority of the night, and some LED lights and things like that, and would recharge in a day, each and every day. And you could do that. But the idea to like electric heating, cooling, that sort of thing, that ain't happening.
Oh, really? Even like a little electric space heater?
Definitely not. And that's the thing about when you start doing the solar stuff, is you get a real sense of what works and what doesn't, and how much actual energy things that you take for granted really do pull.
Yeah.
But just ask yourself, what's the difference in your quality of life for, say, a week down in Texas when the power is out, from being totally without power to being able to do the few things that I talked about.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah, you'd be able to stay connected.
Well, even just to get, some of those things you hear about people not even getting the emergency messages that they need to boil the water because they don't have a way to get that communication.
Exactly.
All right. Some good life tips from Adam Emmert. My do better this week is for this one's a couple months old, but it was news to me. And so my do better this week is for the NCAA. And this goes back to October when Brittany Collins, she is a professional tennis player, and she found out back then that her alma mater, the University of Massachusetts, had hired a law firm that specializes in conducting internal audits. And which seems like a good thing, right? Because colleges, they may want to see just where the money's going to the student athletes and make sure that everything was, you're doing an internal audit once in a while to figure things out.
I'm going to reserve praise for anything lawyer, but okay.
Well, here's what they found out. The audit found that a total of 12 athletes, and I think this was spanning a total of 3 years, that these 12 athletes received a total of $9,100 in excess housing money. So this wasn't the athletes screwing up, though. This was them finding out administratively the money went out. It shouldn't have gone out, and it was only $9,100. Well, 2 of the 12 athletes were on the tennis team. One was Brittany Collins, the tennis player, and she got a total of $252 out of that amount. Same amount went
too much.
Same amount went to her roommate, so a little more than $500 out of this $9,000.
Okay.
And what they found out was when she and her roommate moved out of the dorms on campus and into off-campus housing, the school accidentally kept in a telecommunications subsidy that was going into their scholarship checks. Apparently, according to Collins, she said it was a stipend for the athletes in the on-campus housing so they could have a phone jack for a landline. Mm-hmm. She didn't even have one. So she really didn't even know what it was for. She found out during this process, it sounds like. So for that mistake, part of the total of about $9,000 that was found in the audit, and since the college discovered it, they decided that they should report it to the NCAA to say, hey, we found this. It was $9,000, not a real big deal, but we thought you should know about it. Mm-hmm. What do you suppose is an appropriate punishment for that sort of thing?
A whole lot of nothing.
Seems appropriate, right?
Yeah.
The NCAA stripped the tennis team of 49 wins over 2 seasons, including their conference title, the first one that the school had won in 15 years, because, quote, the excessive financial aid rendered the student athletes ineligible. NCAA rules require member schools to withhold ineligible student athletes from competition until their eligibility is restored, regardless of the school's knowledge. So, for the NCAA to penalize a bunch of college students for what amounted to an accounting error, they were just taking what they thought was their scholarship money that the school was giving them, and for $252 to be considered excessive financial aid. NCAA, do better.
All right. So the 2 tennis players each got $250 that they shouldn't have, correct?
Right.
So we're talking about $500.
And they stripped 49 wins and a conference championship.
That is some of the dumbest crap I have ever heard of in my life. The NCAA is so freaking absurd with these rules, like how they punish, when they punish, and all that. I'll tell you what, Mark Emmert is giving all the Emmerts a bad name.
That's
the
right.
Head of the NCAA. He's the worst Emmert I know. I mean, for sure. I'm very ashamed of that. I just watched a thing the other day on Jeremy Bloom, a kid who was a pro skier back in the 90s. And it was a kick returner for the University of Colorado for 2 seasons and a receiver.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he ended up not being able to play like his last year and a half, something like that, because of him getting money as a pro skier before he was even at the University of Colorado.
Oh,
and
really?
all of this nonsense. It was the dumbest thing.
Huh.
It was the dumbest thing. And it's over and over again with these guys while they sit and rake in billions.
The good thing that's coming of this, though, is this has sent Brittany on a mission. And she's going to senators. She's now made it her mission to fight back against the NCAA because of the stupid crap that she had all these wins stripped from her in her college time. And she's
her teammates.
And her teammates. Yeah, the conference title it's not just hers. Yeah, and now she's saying, okay, we have to fight this. And so the news was building. This happened back in October, but then she really has started this news around this in January. And I think it's even kind of carried over now into February because she's keeping this an issue.
Well, good for her. I hope she keeps fighting the good fight because the NCAA is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's dumb. On to better at life.
my better at life this week, to nobody's surprise, NASA. NASA crushing it this week.
They did it.
They did it. They sent the rover Perseverance to Mars. It survived the 7 minutes of terror, which is the process in which they get the spacecraft from hurtling into the Martian atmosphere to gently setting the thing on the ground. And it's a heavy piece. I mean, I can't remember how many, what it weighed was, how much. It's like, in the tons. It's a big old instrument. And pretty cool. Nailed it. They touched down. Everything was good. But that's not the reason why they're better at life than Skip Bayless this week, Brandon. And this is also going to turn into a plea to NASA as well. You know what we have on Mars now, Brandon?
Martians?
A freaking laser. Perseverance has a freaking laser that shoots rocks and vaporizes them and then analyzes the vapor to see what it's made out of. We have a space laser on Mars. And this is what I think. All of our taxpayer monies went into Perseverance, right?
Uh-huh.
I think you should be able to sign up on a list and go down to Mission Control on a pre-designated day and shoot the freaking laser. I want to shoot a space laser on Mars.
That's a good fundraiser.
Yeah, it'd be a hell of a fundraiser, man.
It's like when in high school that they bring the beat up car that you can take a baseball bat to. And
Sure.
you take a swing for $5
Sure. Only you're shooting a space laser
on Mars.
On Mars. And even if it's just hitting the return key on a keyboard and then waiting 14 minutes, the 7 minutes for the transmission to go to the Perseverance, shoot the rock, and then 7 minutes to send the video back of dude, vaporize that rock. Worth it. I'm totally in.
You have to hook up a big red button that just goes to the keyboard enter key just for the theatrics of it.
Absolutely. Look, they just landed a space laser on Mars. They can give us a big red button and a way for all of us common folk to be able to shoot it. So to NASA and the whole Perseverance team, better at life than Skip Bayless.
Better at life indeed. 2,260 pounds Perseverance weighs.
So 2 tons.
Is it 2 tons? Is 1,000
Isn't a
pounds
ton
1
1,000
ton?
pounds?
I don't know.
I don't
thought
know.
maybe a ton was 2,000 pounds.
A ton's better than or more than some. It's a ton more.
Yeah, 2,000 pounds is 1 ton.
Oh, so 1 ton. There you go.
There we go. We're all kinds of educational on this episode.
Oh, sure.
It's the offseason, people.
You're welcome.
My better at life this week is for some current Seahawks, some former Seahawks. Started out, Quandre Diggs, a Texas native, decided to donate enough for 120 meals for folks down in Texas. He said he was doing that. Then Trey Flowers jumped in. He said he was going to match. Bobby Wagner then jumped in too. And Darius Slay, a former teammate of Quandre Diggs, he jumped in as well. So just by Quandre saying he was going to donate 120 meals, he multiplied it by 4. And then to top it all off, not just the current Seahawks donating meals down in Texas, you have Pierre Desir, who was a former Seahawks corner. He doesn't even have a connection down to Texas. He decided to donate 10,000 meals to the Houston Food Bank. And to see a former Seahawk donating 10,000 meals down to Houston, he's better at life than Skip Bayless.
Man, that is cool. And it makes it a lot easier to root for this team in the league when you get stories like this. I mean, obviously there's stories that make it harder, but this is one of those good ones. But I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat again, Brandon, and I don't think this has anything to do with goodwill to the people of Texas. I just don't see it that way.
There's an ulterior motive?
This is clearly a way to try to get into J.J. Watt's good graces to get him to come to Seattle.
Ooh, I like that. We haven't had any J.J. Watt talk on the show.
No, I figured I'd slip that in right at the end.
Because J.J. Watt needs to come to the Seahawks and be on the team. It's time.
There we go. I mean, Wags is trying to do thing for your beloved Texans and, fellow Texans down there. And come on, man.
Yeah. Why isn't Dwayne Brown getting on the phone here?
You don't think he already has?
He better be.
At least a group text.
Come to Seattle, JJ.
Somebody posted in the Ring of Honor a picture of JJ and his lady, in Seattle with the Space Needle in the background.
Did you look real close at that?
No.
That was Flocktimus Prime that did it. It was just a Photoshop, and it was like the Space Needle photoshopped into a table on the patio.
Oh, nice. Well done.
Yeah.
I looked at it for all of 3 seconds.
I think that was his goal. It was
Okay.
It was actually, I think, downtown Chicago.
Oh, well.
And don't give me the stuff of, how are the Seahawks going to be able to afford J.J. Watt? The Seahawks can restructure Russell Wilson's contract and free up $12 million in cap space without even asking him if he wants to do it. Like, apparently I saw a tweet from the former agent, Joel Corey.
Oh, yes.
Joel Corey said that there's a stipulation in his contract that says that John Schneider can just restructure his contract and make cap space. And by doing that, it would free up $12 million under the salary cap. So there you go. You can get J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt was set to make, I think, less than that this coming season anyway. Maybe it was about $12 million, but he's not going to get cut and then make more in a season where the salary cap's going down.
No, and not only that, but I mean, I would see him as one of those types of guys that would take a lot less to have a real shot to win a chip.
He's not going to Chicago, so calm down, Bears fans.
Because that original Chicago picture could be a fake too from Flocktimus Prime. You don't even know.
And with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
This is episode 325 of the Seahawks.
This is off to a roaring start.